All right, so in this video, we'll be drawing the eye. I have a reference image right here, and I have an H pencil, a 2B, a 4B, and a Tortillion. But any kind of harder pencil, like an H, HB, even a 2H, or even a B, would be good for the outlines, and a 2B and 4B, maybe even a 6B for the shading. So let's get right into it. So looking at the eye, we can see that the upper lid and the lower lid are actually very different shapes. So we want to avoid this kind of like football look, okay, where they're the same. So a way I do that is I use a little blocking in trick, which means basically using some straight lines to find those natural curves. So I usually do a longer diagonal line and then a straight line to kind of symbolize that part, and then a shorter diagonal line to symbolize this part because it's shorter. Okay, and then I go a little bit in and do another diagonal line, straight line, and short line. Okay, and so that just gives me a framework, and it allows me to also include this tear duct. And then I use this to create my curves, the upper and lower eyelid. I can adjust these shapes as I go along, but that at least gives me a starting place. All right, and then what I can do is just get rid of this blocking in strategy. Okay, so now I have the outline of the eye, and of course I can change the shape if I need to. It's a little more rounded at the edge here. Okay, the other thing I want to think about is the iris, which is the colored part of the eye, and where is it placed? Well, we see a little more, it's pretty much in the center, but we see a little more of this side of the sclera, which is the white part of the eye, than that one. So we also see that the lower lid is kind of obscuring this iris. So I'm going to make this a little smaller because it's kind of hanging down too much. This is all going to be in shadow, but we can imagine that's where the tear duct is. And so I'm going to go ahead and get that outlined. It's going to get cut off there. And we see a little more of this side of the sclera. Okay. Now this is where I can get a little bit more into the shape. I feel like this is a little shorter. It kind of curves abruptly to that corner. Okay, so that's the best part about drawing light, is that you can change the lines really easily and make it look more true to the shape that you're seeing. Okay. Then in terms of the lower lid, we're seeing a little bit of the thickness of that. It's definitely thicker up here and then gets thinner, so we see a little less. I'm going to actually turn my drawing so it's a little more comfortable for me. There we go. And then the upper fold of the eyelid, we don't see much until we get to this edge. Then we see like a little crease in here, and we have a shadow that kind of carries that down. Okay, so that's looking great. The next step is to get out our shading pencils, and I'm looking at this and I already noticed the angle is a bit wrong. So I'm just going to shorten that tear duct and like drop it down a little bit and bring it. So that's the best part about working with this H pencil to start, because it's nice and light and you can change these lines very easily. Okay, so we've got an outline, and then I'm gonna erase my football shape from earlier because we gotta think about where our eyebrow is gonna go, somewhere in there. So the hairs kind of go up and then they turn to the side. So I'm just gonna lightly have that kind of figured out. So now I'm gonna go in with my darker pencil, my 2B, and just start to solidify some of the lines. And then I want to look at how I'm going to shade this sclera. So the white part of the eye is the sclera, and you'll notice it's really dark in the corners, and then it's actually quite gray throughout the whole thing. There's no pure white. So I'm going to build up my shading in layers, so I don't want to have too much. And I'm going to go right over my iris because that's going to be quite dark, so it won't really matter. Okay, you can use your finger or your Tortillion is a great tool to blend this. Okay, and then I'm going to make sure that the tear duct, I kind of hint at some of this membrane. There's like a little fold of membrane where the actual tear duct is. So make sure I get that. And if it looks too dark, I can always lighten that up with my kneaded eraser. And then over here, it's really the lower part of the eye that's darker. And this shadow. And of course I can edit that, but you want to make sure that we shade the white part of the eye, the sclera, because this is like an actual, you know, globe, like a little circle sitting in the socket in the skull. So there is some shadow, and then of course the upper lid is creating shadow. Okay, so that looks decent. And then the iris. On this one, it's a little tricky because with all these reflections, we can't really see the pupil. So I'm gonna make the outside darker to start and clean up that line. Okay. And then imagine pupil is somewhere in here, and we have these little tiny shapes for the reflections up at the top of the eye. So I'm going to just kind of make some little shapes for that, and then start shading in. So up under the lid is going to be really dark. So this might be a good time to turn to my 4B. And then the I want to kind of shade in this direction where the lines are going out, radiating out, because that's the structure of the muscles in the iris. But I also just want to create like an all-over dark tone. And especially dark in the center. So I'm just going through, looking at my reference picture, trying to kind of create the same look and create these markings that go out. that up. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. Clean up any weird stuff that got on there. Okay. There's actually some like little dark parts on the side. There we go. So that looks pretty decent. If you ever think it got too dark, you can use your, kneaded eraser to put some more tone on there. You can use your Tortillion to blend. Make sure things look natural. Then the next part is getting the eyelashes and some of the shading of the lower lid. So this is a little trickier part, and there's a part of the lower lid called the waterline in makeup, and this, like in makeup arts, we call it the waterline, but it's basically just like the thickness of the lid showing. And I want to make that line clear. So I'm going to use my H pencil again and just kind of show the thickness of the lid a little bit with shading. And then if we look at this picture, there's actually a little shading on this space. So it's a little tricky, and there's kind of shadow in the eyeball where it touches. So it's kind of a funny little spot, but if you don't draw it, then you don't really know where to put the eyelashes. Okay. And then of course the actual sclera of the eye, we should make sure we know exactly where that is. So I'm just kind of cleaning that up. Okay. All right. And then the upper lid, we're seeing a crease right here. So it's kind of connecting with this line, and then the crease just kind of arches here, and that's where we're gonna shade a lot and put our eyelashes. So we're gonna do our pre-shading before the eyelashes on the upper lid as well, and then we'll go ahead and add the eyelashes to both lids. So the shadow kind of comes out in the crease here. And of course you can use your Tortillion to blend. Okay. And then get our nice sharp 4B pencil. And this upper line is actually quite dark in this reference image. And I think that's something we need to show so that we can get the eyelashes in that are growing literally from under this lid, so we can start to show them. I'm going to go over the line several times just to make them nice and soft, and then let the little tip of the lash peek out. Make them kind of irregular. And not make them all going the same way. This is what's going to make this look more realistic. And then we actually have a few smaller lashes kind of turning down. Often people will have a few turning down in the corners of the eyes. And we'll just thicken up this line to kind of signify more lashes that we're not seeing. And then we want to make sure it's shaded in that crease and the shadow of it. All right, and then I'm going to just darken up because it is actually quite dark all the way in here. Get that softened up. All right, we're almost done. Kind of shape that a little bit. Okay, and then the last thing we need to do is the lower lashes. I'm going to take my nice sharp dark pencil, and I want them to come out from the edge of the lower lashes are not so long. You'll have a few long ones here or there, but unless people have really long lashes or makeup on, you don't see them so much. They're not as prominent as the upper ones. So we'll kind of soften that up. There's a few over by the edge that are really tiny. I'm sure this little structure is in shadow. Okay. And we have a pretty good approximation of this eye. I would just notice that there's usually some shadow here because this is kind of feeding into the bridge of the nose. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get some all over tone underneath the brow that I can blend out. Because that's something I'm seeing. And then usually they're, under the socket or under the lower lid, we have a little bit where the eye kind of peeks out. And then I'm realizing this is quite dark, so I want to make sure I get that kind of darkened up. Okay. Clear off my Tortillion. It has a lot of graphite on it right now. Just want that to be kind of smooth. All right, let's get the brow and then we are done. So again, the lines of the brow are gonna go up and then kind of turn to the side. So I'm gonna start layering these very lightly. And you wanna kind of draw a base of these lines and then fill them in. The brow is thicker and then there's an arch. And then I use my darker pencil to just pull out certain hairs. And this process just takes a while because some hairs are gonna appear darker, so you really wanna highlight those. But it's almost like doing the hair of the head as well. So you're gonna push harder and get a sharper edge on some of these lines and make it a little more softer on some of them. Okay. But I think that looks pretty good for this tutorial. And of course you can go in and change little things, but that is the basic tutorial for drawing an eye.